Many in the business community are coalescing against the idea of putting the director of DHEC in the governor's cabinet. What does that tell you about the DHEC board, Ms. Sheen?
Well, I sponsor legislation to reform DHEC. I believe it should be part of the cabinet agency. I can't get in the mindset of everybody. I think that I tell the business community that I don't think their interests are served well by the DHEC structure that we have right now. I don't think conservationist interests are served very well either. I think that there are good people working in DHEC. I support my state employees, and there are good people there. But the structure that we have right now does not lend itself to accountability. It does not lend itself to, frankly, to the speedy processing of requests from conservationists or from business. It boggles my mind as to why anybody would oppose reform and restructuring of DHEC, and it's disappointing, frankly. I thought last year that we had really had an opportunity to come together, all the interests that were out there, and to coalesce around the legislation that I introduced and others introduced along with me, and I was disappointed that it wasn't, and I'm still optimistic that we can bring people together. Probably the greatest skill that I've brought myself to the General Assembly is my ability to bring people together, and those of you who've worked with me to bridge the differences between the conservation community and the business community know that it's something I take pride in and I work hard to do. I'm optimistic that we still, if we have a governor who's vocal about it and works hard to bring people together, can achieve some real reform at DHEC.
Right?
The system we have is antiquated. It needs to change. I think the agency head should be appointed by the governor. I think that's better for the people of the state generally. I think that's better for business and industry because I think it would increase efficiency. And I think that it would increase accountability because all could look to the governor and who he appoints to determine whether they agreed with policy and who was responsible for that policy. So I think it needs to change. And I've not been in the legislature like Vincent, so I've never introduced a bill, but I've gotten a lot of them passed. And I think as your governor, I could pass that legislation and bring it into law. And I think it's time that it be done.
Well,
when you talk about DHEC, one thing, and this isn't personal against any other candidate in the race, and it's certainly not personal against some other folks. I just believe that for too long we have continued to recycle the same crowd of folks, and not a whole lot's changed. And I think that's wrong. We were asked about the DHEC question in our first televised debate in Orangeburg, and I just called balls and strikes. I said, look, if I'm governor, I would think that the head of DHEC would be somebody from the research community, maybe from environmentalists, maybe a medical doctor, and it's a lobbyist. And I just thought from the outside looking in, that's probably not the way to do business, or at least that's not the way I would want to do business as governor. And of course, that got me a long 4- or 5-page letter from the head of DHEC, and it's nothing personal, but I think it's a matter of leadership and perspective on that agency, and that's where I come down on that issue.
Jim Rex?
Well, your question was, what does it tell us about the existing board? I think one thing it probably says is they'd rather have the devil they know than the devil they don't know. So when you talk about changing it, they're not sure if that's going to be an improvement or not. This is a really perplexing issue for lots of us, I think. In my present role, I do work with DHEC on the health side, H1N1, for example, on the vaccination program, dealing with putting together the infrastructure for future pandemics, not if, but when they occurred. And frankly, I've been pretty satisfied with what I've seen on that side. I've been less satisfied with what I've seen on the environmental protection side. It may very well be that we're asking that agency to do too many things. It's too broad. And I'm unique, I think, as a candidate in that I actually have to administrate reforms in a large state agency. It's one thing to submit legislation and say, this is what we're going to do, but it's another thing to see if it's really an improvement. As far as DHEC is concerned, I would be intrigued by looking at whether or not that agency needs to be split and perhaps combined with some others that focus on protecting our natural resources and our environment, and with healthcare reform looming in one kind or another, in the future having an agency that really focuses more on that side. I can't imagine an executive, a director, who's going to have the necessary expertise in both of those broad dimensions. And as someone with executive experience in terms of managing programs and people and dollars, I think I'd like to get in there. I don't think anything will happen this year or not, but if it doesn't, I'd like to get in there and kick the tires for one period of time, probably 6 to 8 months. Sometimes it's leadership, sometimes it's a different type of mandate. Sometimes it is restructuring, but you use up an awful lot of political capital every time you restructure. So I think you ought to take a look at who's in those roles right now.